If government has focused on its part to prepare ahead of what is to come, a lot of what we are saying today could have been averted. So government needs to refocus their priority on what has to be done and focus on it adequately.
In recent months, devastating floods have struck various regions across Africa, with significant incidents in Kenya and Cameroon, with the overflowing rivers in Cameroon exacerbating the already dire situation in Nigeria, particularly Maiduguri, where previous flooding has left hundreds and thousands displaced. As we face an increasing frequency of natural disasters, we must ask, is Africa prepared to handle this crisis? What role does infrastructure play, especially in a continent burdened by debt? And how do these issues intersect with existing vulnerabilities to natural disasters? Hello, and welcome to On Rights, Crime, and Justice. I'm Toni Ogunbanjo, and today I have three guests joining me. Enock Kiminta, an expert in integrated water resources management, all the way from Kenya, will be joining us on the program virtually. We also have with us Kingsley Jeremiah, Deputy Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspaper in Abuja. And all the way from Maiduguri, we have Muhammed Umar Bolari. Together, we will explore the interconnectedness of this environmental crisis across Africa and their impact on communities. Mr. Bolari, we'll start with you. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Nice to be on this program.
Yes. So let's dive right into the topic of discussion. Can you bring us up to speed on the incident that happened in Maiduguri on the 10th of September? Take us back to the 10th of September. What exactly happened? What do you remember on that particular day? And then, aside that, let us know what's happening right now. Have the waters receded? How much has the government done so far that has yielded improvement in the situation? Just bring us up to speed on everything that happened right from September 10th till right now.
Okay. On that September 10th, I saw, in fact, most residents of Maiduguri will tell you they saw something they've never seen in their lives in Maiduguri. We saw hundreds and hundreds of people walking the streets with their belongings, children, with women and men. So that tells you there is something unusual in the sea. Yeah. That was the day. Although it started about 2 days, the water was coming, and I think there was a warning that on the 9th of September, in the night, I learned in some areas government officials went and made announcement that people should start out of their houses, that they soon all those areas will be flooded. Therefore, around in the night, yes, people started packing and leaving their home. Some who were maybe were fast asleep then were caught in the distance, and they were not able to move out of their houses until that morning. And when it was morning, it was very difficult for some to even leave their houses because everywhere was flooded.
Okay, so what's the situation? Are so many people still displaced? Do we still have a lot of people out of their homes? What's going on? And are the waters receding? What exactly is happening now after, those few weeks?
Yes, the water has receded since.
Okay.
But so many people could not return to their houses because some of the areas are still flooded, and government directed all the affected persons who could not access their homes to report to the IDP camps. This is where they are being kept until maybe arrangements have been made to return to their homes. but some have been able to, return to their houses. They clean up their houses and return, and life is slowly getting back to normalcy.
Okay, what was the state of the IDP camps? You know, we have information from different places that there weren't very good facilities over there. There wasn't clean water, food wasn't enough. What was the IDP camp able to achieve? Were people, you know, at least able to get a bit of comfort away from their home? What exactly was the situation in that IDP camp?
I can't tell you because I have not been to any of those camps, but from what I heard, government has done a lot, in ensuring that the people are comfortable there. They provided, materials for them like mattresses, mats, and dishes and all that, for just to make them comfortable. And apart from government, so there are so many organizations, individuals, have been given assistance. So I think it's from what I heard, they are being taken care of. Okay.
All right, thank you so much. So now let's shift our focus to Kenya, where we also have similar situations of flooding over there. Mr. Enock, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I would also like you to provide an overview of the recent flooding situation in Kenya and its implications for the region. So what exactly happened and what's happening right now?
Thank you very much, Adoni. Much appreciate for having me here. And basically, my name is Enock Kiminta from Kenya. And I would also say Kenya is equally impacted by the devastating attributes of climate change. So we are not exceptional with other African countries. And of course, as we always say, and we will continue saying, is that as Africa, we are continuing experiencing devastating impacts of climate change, yet we only contribute 3% of greenhouse emission. And we need really to speak out about this, because case in point in Kenya, like 3 months ago, we had some very, very serious floods whereby about 1,260 Kenyans lost their lives out of the floods, rivers breaking their banks, dams breaking their backs, sweeping people, property, including destroying the environment. And of course, I will not forget to mention the outbreak of various diseases that are associated with the dirty water that is going through some of these urban centers in Kenya. So as a country, we really do not have that capacity to really, or rather, enough infrastructure really to abate the impacts of climate change in Kenya. And therefore, this is something that we really need to do something about it, because it keeps on coming, it goes, it comes. And as I always say, is that in Africa, there are 4 challenges that we need to address for us really to effectively fight climate change, of course, with the support of the developed countries. Number 1 is that we're experiencing too much water that we can handle. And if we don't have too much water, it is too little water in terms of drought. It's also another challenge that we are having is the issue of contaminated water, because all these floods are also affecting the quality of water our people are taking. And of course, mismanagement of this water is the 4th challenge. So if we could work around these 4 challenges, then together with the developed countries supporting Africa to work around some of these challenges I've just mentioned, then we'll have fought climate change by 40%. But again, the contributor of these problems we are having in Africa also need to be accountable, also need to be responsible, and compensate Africans for the devastating impacts of climate change.
Yes, of course. We'll definitely get into that conversation. So, Mr. Kingsley, we have you here on set. So now, as regards the Maiduguri situation, there's also been overflows in Cameroon. Do you think that this has also affected the situation in Maiduguri? Do you think that this relates to the amount of flooding that we have in there?
Okay, so I don't think the Cameroon issue directly relates to the Maiduguri issue. Before the Maiduguri issue happened, we've been seeing a level of flooding across the northern region. We've seen situations in Makurdi. We've seen what happened in Bauchi, where the road was totally cut into two. We saw what happened in Niger, where a major road was also cut into two because of the flooding. Now we are seeing a greater level of rainfall, and that is why you're seeing most of the situations that is happening across the northern region. And this situation is happening at an alarming rate compared to how it used to happen before. So I don't think the situation in Cameroon directly relates to what is happening in Maiduguri.
Okay, so now let's look at it from the aspect of government. You know, this ongoing issue in Maiduguri, how much can we say? Like you said, it wasn't because of Cameroon, and we know it's not just a natural disaster. There were warnings. The government was warned, and it's like they were slow to respond. So how much can we assert that this devastating event was as a result of negligence of the government? Because, you know, warnings came through, even both in Kenya as well. There was warnings, and it's like the government was slow to respond. So how much can we assert this to the issue of negligence on the part of the African government?
Yes, so I can speak directly around the situation in Nigeria, which is also common for the rest of the African countries. And Nigeria has close to about 400 dams, and most of these dams are scattered across the country. If you remember very well, sometimes in July, the federal government approached the World Bank to borrow ₦500,000 for the safety of most of the dams that we have. So the government can say that they are not aware of the state of the dam. So that shows that as of July, they already know, or before that time, they already know what the situation of these dams look like. Most of the dams were built decades ago, and they were not properly maintained. Funding for maintaining them were not also there. And you know that the major reason why you build dam, one of the primary reasons is to control flooding. So if over time you have been having flooding situation, you have been having warning around climate issue, you might have been saying that you possibly need to pay more attention to the dam. So over time, government has not paid attention to the dam as they should pay attention to it. And it is not out of place to say that this is a direct negligence on the part of the government. Why we talk about the natural disaster and climate-related issue, if government has focused on its part to prepare ahead of what is to come, a lot of what we are saying today could have been averted.
Yes. So now, Mr. Enock, let's go back to you. I also want to throw this question to you as well, because I know in Kenya, there were also warnings. There were also warnings because there's a lot of climate change that was going on. So there were warnings that this flooding was going to come. So would you also say that the government was slow to respond, and that's why Kenya is where it is today as regards this flooding situation?
Yes, I think as a country, we have a fully fledged department called Kenya Meteorological Department that always warns, or rather gives information prior to some of these heavy rains that are happening. And yes, they are doing that on time, and their role ends there. But now when it comes to now government putting in place structures, mechanism to control the impact these floods will have to the people, is where we have a problem as a country. And looking back, or looking at what is happening really when it comes to flooding, most of this flooding are being caused by one, destruction of catchment areas. So there's no longer vegetation that can hold this water. There are colonial dams that have been constructed in Kenya since early 1960s. So nobody has been really monitoring some of these dams to ensure that they have that capability of holding that water. So you find that anytime it rains, those dams fills up, they break the embankment, and all the way as it goes downwards, it is sweeping people, it's killing people, it's destroying property. So that is for the part of government in Kenya. I see some reluctance in ensuring that there is continued monitoring of these dams, just to ensure that they are safe anytime there is extra flooding in some of these places where these dams are. So yes, we have a department that gives us some of this warning, but you still find the government waiting for the disaster to happen, then they act. Other than a government that has been alerted, act on the alert before it causes damages. So that is what we need to change. We need to look at the safety of these dams. We need to look at the safety of some of the infrastructures we have put in place, and we need also to heed on some of these alerts some of these scientists are giving to us.
Okay, you know, in Kenya as well as Nigeria, but before we come to Nigeria, let's continue this conversation with you. The government also launched some relief materials to the people. Do you think that this was a sufficient measure, especially considering the amount of damage? Some people lost their lives, they lost properties, they even lost jobs. And then it seems like, you know, the effort of government is usually geared towards reaction and not being proactive. So it was like this was just a response to what could have been prevented. So what measure would you say that these relief materials have gone so far? How much would you say that they have actually bettered the situation?
Interesting. I wouldn't say that is a measure, but for me, I would say it's a PR, because it's politicians who always are the first people to rush to some of these things where the flooding has happened or the death has happened. And I would say the measures are short-term, just to address the situation at that time. Give me a blanket, give me a loaf of bread, give me a packet of milk, and that's it. That community, that particular village is left on its own. They don't have a home. They don't have food to eat as they try to reassemble themselves so that they can live as they were living before. So again, as you say, it's sort of just being addressing that issue there. But in terms of going forward to control these and also bring these communities back to their normal life is what is lacking.
Exactly.
So politicians are taking advantage of this. They come with blankets, trucks of food. You give these people food and it ends there. But in terms of tomorrow, the days to come, nobody seems to care. So these communities are left on their own.
Yes, so Mr. Kingsley, I'll throw that same question to you as well. You know, we know, even the president mentioned it in his speech of what he has done as regards this Maiduguri issue. So how do we measure up that response? Can we say that this was actually sufficient, or, you know, this was more of reactive than proactive?
Yeah, obviously, like you said, that's the right word to use for it. I think it is much more of reaction than being proactive. And let me stress that the governments in Nigeria do not actually have capacity to manage disaster as they should manage it. We've been seeing a lot of disasters going on. A lot of resources are already going into that. So the best thing the government should do is to be very proactive, not to cause another problem, another disaster that you begin to spend money on to manage. And let me also stress that the people have the right to live their life, and whosoever that is building infrastructure, both private institution and government institution, should be able to properly take care of whatever facility or infrastructure they have built, because what natural disaster does is it affects everyone, the rich as well as the poor. You can see that even at the palace of the emir of Maiduguri, it was totally flooded. Most of the people, I mean, from the presidency who went there were in the flood. So you need to be very proactive to take care of what you need to take care of, and then ensure that the people can live their life freely without fear. Because the fund, you can also see that when this situation happened, from across the world, people are bringing on board donation. These are things that should have been done years ago. It is not about donation, and government is not doing a favor to the citizen by intervening when this disaster happened. They have to be as proactive as possible. And I can tell you that government can provide sufficient relief. It can't bridge the gap as much as people would have lost, there are a lot of things. The houses people have lost, the businesses people already lost, the life of people that are lost in those situations. How can the government bring them back? So if you're not proactive enough, if you don't do the things you need to do at the right time, you're going to come back to this kind of situation. And let me tell you, these situations are all around us. The damaged dams are everywhere across Nigeria. Yes. Then the climate-related issues are still there. So what are you going to do? Government would most likely still channel resources into maintaining their big portfolio instead of doing the right thing that they need to do. So those are critical issues that government really needs to focus on and address.
Yes, you spoke about channeling resources to their own portfolio, and I was about to go that does this point to the fact that the African government has not taken much thought and initiative into investing into sustainable infrastructures? Can we say that the finances that are meant to ensure that these things don't happen, now instead of them, we would have channeled them into building sustainable infrastructures instead of responding to this issue? So can we say that that's a pointer that a lot of thought has not been given into that?
Obviously, that has been the situation. I mean, when you look at the situation of Nigeria, what have we really done with our oil money? Where have we channeled our oil money into? Now, if you have a sensible government in a sane society, you would have been planning to avert situations like this, okay? But the past government didn't pay attention to it, and the current government did not also pay much attention to it. So it is a problem that have been existing long time ago, but instead of channeling our resources, the money we've got from taxpayers' money, across most of these places, people are paying tax, but instead of using that tax to maintain sustainable infrastructure, government is building running cost of governance that the masses have been canvassing about to bring down. Because if you fail to do the right thing, it's going to fall back on your table on the long run. So over time, our government, particularly the government of Nigeria and everywhere across Africa, the situation is the same. We spend money on things we shouldn't spend money on instead of building the right relationship. And right now, the situation is very worse. We're already in debt. The cost of borrowing is going very high across the world. So finding that money to actually do what you need to do. I told you earlier that government is looking to borrow $500 million to guarantee the safety of the dams that we have in Nigeria. What they should have done long time ago, you have to borrow that money. It add up to the debt you already have. Whatever has happened in Maiduguri, government is going to spend on that. And these are palliative. These are not critical stuff. These are not sustainable infrastructure that can actually address what we need to address. So government needs to refocus their priority on what has to be done and focus on it adequately.
We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll delve more into the conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned. So, Mr. Enock, I'm going to also turn that question to you. We're speaking on, how much government has invested in financial resources as regards sustainable infrastructure. So, as you know, Africa in general, there's a lot of debt crisis, and even in Kenya as well. So how are we able to balance this, to ensure that because it's a bit difficult, because especially right now where this disaster has happened, funds will be reallocated to emergency services. They'll be reallocated to these bridges and properties that have collapsed. And we're still servicing debt. So how do you think we can balance these issues together?
Thank you, Aduni, for that question. I think Kenya has made significant strides in trying to put frameworks in place to see how we can, all of us, address these issues of climate change. And case in point is that the government of Kenya has established a fully fledged ministry that is in charge of climate change. It's called the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which specifically has to deal with issues of climate change. And but it doesn't stop there, because again, Kenya is also Kenya level of borrowing is quite too high that we cannot no longer sustain as a country. And at the moment, we are going through some financial crisis as a country. Now that you all heard that there was some uprising by the Gen Z trying to hold the government responsible for taxing Kenyans way too much, yet we don't know where that money is going to. So for me, I would not say that we don't have enough capacity to manage, or rather to control impacts of climate change in Africa. The problem we have in Africa is the problem of corruption, because if the money could be put into right use, if the government could listen to the advices of scientists, advice of engineers, and put those advice by the engineers or scientists to inform their decisions, then we will be able to fight climate change as a continent. So for me, sorry to say this, but I don't see any balance we can create until first of all we fight this elephant in the room, which is corruption.
Okay, so now, Mr. Kingsley, let's look at this from the aspect of urbanization, because there's rapid urbanization across Africa and even down to Nigeria. When you look at places like Lagos, and even a few months ago, we did have a flooding situation in Lagos. What lessons do you think we can learn from this? How do you think we can balance this? Because now the issue is that, when you look at the drainage system, it doesn't match up. The amount of waste that's being expended does not match up to, the drainage systems that we have because of the amount of people in that particular area. So how do you think we can solve this problem? What lessons can we learn from this, to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again?
The drainage part of the issue is something, but when floods happen, a lot of the time, it overwhelms the drainage system. Now, in developed countries, government have planned for most of the drainages you see. Okay. And then in our system, I will also say that the people have a level of responsibility to ensure that they maintain the drainage system. You see situations where people easily throw in their waste into the drainage system. I mean, that happens across board. Go to Lagos, go to most of our cities. People do that. So I think organizations like the National Orientation Agency should do a whole lot of sensitization around how people, the responsibility of people and what people can actually do. But I think that responsibility and what people can do is just not as high as the level of disasters we're seeing currently, because we need a very holistic approach to the disasters, particularly the flooding issue we are seeing. Because most of the time when you see these things, it happens in places where you don't even find issues relating to urbanization or drainage stuff. I gave you the instance of Niger State, where the flood took over the road and then cut off the bridge into two. There were no people around that particular community. The same situation that happened in Bauchi. There are no people living around there. But government needs to begin to sit down in Nigeria and across Africa to understand that while we do not cause most of the climate issue, we are at the receiving end of the climate issue, and we need to strengthen our disaster management system. We also need to put measures in place that can actually really help us address some of these issues, particularly the flooding issue, which you have seen in recent time. And I have mentioned to you earlier, one of the things governments can do in terms of the flooding, one is to maintain the existing dams that we have in the country. Secondly is to build more dams. Dam is one of the best ways to control the floodings you're seeing. Now, in Nigeria, the dams are outrightly in the hand of the government. Government need to find a way to bring the private sector together to manage the dam. They should manage it in such a way that the economic benefit of dam can also be unlocked. While we use it to manage the flood, we can also use it to improve our agricultural products. We can also use it to solve our electricity issue. So I'm aware that the World Bank and a few private sector have been talking to the Nigerian government. It is time for the Nigerian government to listen to this kind of advice, ensure that the dams that we have are possibly concession in the hand of private people to maintain and make economic value from. What is the need of building 400 dam that you cannot maintain? You can maintain it and you can concession it to people who can generate electricity and also use it to improve our agricultural situation. So I think these are mechanisms that government really needs to plan in much more of an holistic manner that can help society.
Okay, so let's go back to you, Mr. Enock. You know, in the cause of the flood in Kenya, a lot of farmlands were destroyed and livestock were lost, crops, everything. Do you fear that this might lead to food shortage, as a lot of farmers have lost their means of survival, and as well as, you know, the work that they do on those farmlands? So do you fear that this might lead to food shortage in Kenya?
Yes, even as we speak, 2 months ago, we just had a lot of water killing people, destroying property. But even as we speak now, there are communities who are being given relief food. So
Wow.
there are some community members who are being affected by hunger. Even as we speak, government is supplying them with relief food. Yeah. So even as you rightfully put, the government of Kenya hasn't really provided alternative shelter for these communities who have been affected by the floods that happened a couple of months ago. They are still living in tented camps. These tented camps do not have access to clean and safe water. Issues of sanitation, women are really suffering because they could not get somewhere a toilet, a very simple toilet they can go to relieve themselves. Children also, when it comes to their education, it is being affected because the school where they were has been swept out. The camp where they are living in at the moment they are not accessing any education because there is no school anywhere. So we are just from I would say we are just from the frying pan into the fire.
Okay, so Mr. Enock, how do you think that what do you think Kenya can do to build back better? What nature-based solutions can we implement, can be implemented to restore, ecosystems? What do you think they can do to ensure that they move from this and this kind of thing doesn't happen again? What exactly do you suggest that the government implements?
There are quite a number of things that I would recommend for the government of Kenya really to undertake to ensure that such a thing will not happen again. And one thing is that I think the government of Kenya really needs to undertake a survey to ensure the safety of some of these dams that are sitting in high-risk areas, so that they are sure that its safety is really in good condition. And then also, there are quite a number of initiatives I think the government has rolled out, and one of them is 30 trees by 2030. And this is basically an initiative to restore all our forests that have been degraded.
Okay.
So that is one. And of course, we also need to promote nature-based solutions that also communities can benefit out of them. And this is one of them is the issue of agroforestry, whereby we can integrate indigenous trees with trees, for instance, that can provide fruits, so that communities can take care of some of these forests that the government is restoring. We also need to look at because our wetlands act as our shocks, because anytime there is a flood, wetlands sort of slows these floods from moving. So we need to restore these wetlands back, if not back to its original status, but close to their original status. So I go back again to financing. Again, the government really needs to top up the money they are allocating in addressing climate change. It may be mitigation initiatives, it may be adaptation initiatives, but we need sufficient funds to enable us really to fight climate change in Kenya.
Back to you, Mr. Bolari. You're there live in Maiduguri, and you've seen this and you've experienced it. Are there specific things that you want that has not been implemented there? Do you think that everything that needs to be done has been done? What more, based on what you've seen live on there, what do you think there's more? What more do you think needs to be done by the government to, ensure that this kind of thing doesn't repeat itself?
Just like say, they need to. I learned this that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe probably building more bigger dams, not just at Alo. This is one point. We still have another source of river where if the water comes, it can still flood the town. There is another thread apart from that Alo Dam. There is another side of the city. So I expect government to build things, experts, and take the advice of experts, implement all the advice they give to the government.
Okay, so back to you, Mr. Kingsley. In the US, we have what is called a Flood Disaster Protection Act of 1973, which provides for federally subsidized insurance for people that have properties, especially in flood-identified places. So, and we don't have such laws here in Africa, in Nigeria especially. What do you think that this kind of laws need to be implemented, especially as regards compensation from people that have lost their properties? So, do you think that these laws and even more need to be implemented in Nigeria, for compensation of these people that have lost so many things?
Yes, so I think that tackling the problem from regulatory and legal perspective is very important. Situations where farmer typically they run at a loss a lot of the time when flooding happen. So if these farmer, particularly smallholder farmers, have a level of insurance that can cater from their loss, can cater for their losses, it will address a lot of the problem we have with food insecurity in the country, because this farmer can easily go back and then with the insurance attempt doing one or two things. And the National Assembly also have to live up to their responsibility in making sure that since we have not seen a very concrete plan from the government, we have something that is outrightly very concrete that we can really look at, and then that can become a law that we can work with to address the kind of problem we have. And I also note that Nigeria has a lot of development institutions. We have the Niger Delta Development Body. We have the Northeast Development Body. We have a lot of other bodies. I think it is time for these people. I read a story done by The Guardian some weeks ago, development institutions without development. It is time for this development institution where their dedicated fund that goes into them should find a way to come up with measures that can actually mitigate some of this disaster. Because one option that we possibly advise is, when the National Assembly possibly come up with any law, there have to be a funding mechanism, maybe 1% or 2% of our oil money going into that fund, and then from that you can manage certain disasters as they should be managed. We also have the ecological fund currently in Nigeria. It is time to begin to ask questions. What do we actually do with the ecological fund that we have? What level of investment are they doing? So you need to design your priority. You need to know what is of a priority, and then tell these development institutions, tell funds like the Ecological Fund and other fund managers on what to really do and how to channel these resources into mitigating a problem. So if these people invest in good drainage, if they invest we've discussed the issue of dam earlier, if they invest in damming, and then if there is awareness across communities, flood-affected communities, on what, because the warnings are always there, way ahead of time, and then they come year after year. So if government can strategically plan sensitization across this community and also build infrastructure that can help, I think most of the problem we have will not be as serious as it is. The sad news is that this might not stop anytime soon, and it might continue to get worsen compared to what we are currently seeing. So it is time to really sit down, one, plan legal framework, plan a level of regulatory framework, and then design a concrete step that can work. Most of the steps we have seen so far are post-disaster management kind of approach. They are not a level of proactive kind of approach that can solve the problem for now and the future.
Okay, so but aside government, there's also the role that the people play. For instance, in Maiduguri, you know, we hear that there are some of the people that have built on these floodplains, and those things also contribute. So what do you think, like, the people, the citizens as well, can do in communities? Because, you know, they also have a role to play at the very base level. So what difference in their ways of life can they do to ensure that we don't have this, you know, to mitigate this effect of climate change, and even as well as this effect of negligence as well?
You see, before people build their houses in Nigeria, they go to a government institution to get approval for whatever structure they are going to put on the ground. This institution also have a monitoring and compliance body that goes across community and can tell people, do not build here. If you build, we pull it down. Okay. Now, there is also people, for you to build your house, you need to obtain what is called environmental assessment impact before you build whatever you want to build. But the level of corruption in the system make people get some of these approval in a corrupt way. But it is a government institution, a government, a civil servant that is responsible for all of that. So the government itself first need to live up to their responsibility. Whatever structure you need to put in place, if it doesn't have to be there, it shouldn't be there. And I don't see a sense where you put structure in place and then you pull it down, like the situation in Lagos. You're already given an approval, an institution of the state already gave approval, and then you're coming to say, oh, this approval was a mistake, we will pull your structure down. If you're proactive enough, the structure shouldn't even be there in the first place. Yeah. So across the world, people sometimes won't do things the right way. It is the government, it is the institution of the government that should help people to do it in the right way. And that can happen everywhere, where people are not used to just obeying the law. You make them, in one way or the other, obey the law. You enforce the law so that people can obey. But in a situations where you have issues around shelter, people do not have places to live. You find shanties everywhere, people trying to lay their head. And then you find other locations across, for instance, pick Abuja where we live. For example, you find massive houses everywhere, but people are sleeping on the street. They don't have where to live. So these people, when they find the opportunity to put their structure somewhere, to lay their head, they will do it. So government also needs to distribute the resources in an even manner. We need to bridge the inequality gap in the system so that people will be able to also find a way to buy land, build their houses where they should build their houses. So the problem still revolves around the government.
Okay. So, Mr. Enock, so that's about the questions we have for you. So we want to ask, any final words, any words of information that you want to give us more on what's happening, and what would you like to pass across to the people and the government as well, as regards this situation that Africa is currently facing?
Thank you for that question. I think for me, as I always say, in any forum I get an opportunity to speak, is that no one is safe until we all are. It doesn't matter which part of Africa you come from, you are not safe until the entire Africa is safe. Therefore, we must all of us join effort, we must collectively join our hands and fight climate change as a continent. And I also want to really say, to put across that we shouldn't be waiting for disasters to happen. Let's put in place structures, infrastructure that really protect our people, protect the environment, and protect our precious natural resources that God has given us. Also, I want also to put this challenge across, maybe to the wider African Union, that they need to up their game. They need really to negotiate for the right of Africa, for the African people to receive their rightfully loss and damage compensation as they are supposed to. So we no longer want to hear statements. We want to see action and commitments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How about you, Mr. Bolari from Maiduguri? What else would you like to pass across to the people out there and to the government? What final words would you say?
Okay, just as we expect the government, to put measures in place to be proactive and, to stop the occurrence of such disasters in future, with the citizens, the ordinary people to have a responsibility. In the case of Maiduguri now, there are so many hundreds of houses built on the water channel, and all the areas have been flooded. Those people have lost their houses. So the challenge now is we don't even know whether government will compensate them or not, because what government says is those houses were built illegally without any approval. They don't have any, proper titles and all that. So my advice is that the citizens, we the citizens have responsibility to, abide by laws and ensure that wherever we want to build a house, we have proper, approval, the land are properly titled, and we have to ensure that where we build our houses are not areas that are prone to such disasters.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this conversation. Mr. Enock, all the way from Kenya, and Mr. Bolari from Maiduguri. And Mr. Kingsley, any final words for us on this program?
I will say that the people have a right, and government should respect the right of the people. It is the right, people have the right to live a peaceful life, okay? And then when governments need to play their role in terms of maintaining the infrastructure they have, they should do everything possible to maintain that infrastructure. And government should not always resort to palliative or a post-disaster management for people as they have done over time. So, and wherever palliative you see that government has given or has done in terms of the Maiduguri store and other infrastructure failure you have seen, government should not, or the people should not see it as something serious or something important that the government is doing for them. Government is playing its own responsibility, and then government has also failed in playing the critical responsibility. That's why they are resorting to the secondary responsibility of trying to provide a temporary palliative for people, or a temporary measure to cushion the effects of whatever may have happened. But I think it is high time for the Nigerian government particularly to plan properly and not wait for the developed world to address most of the critical issue that we have currently that is facing us. And then in budgeting, we should play a priority in the right way. Otherwise, we keep having the same problem that we'll be having, and then keep spending resources on what we shouldn't have actually spent resources on. Now that we have very limited resources, and now that the revenue we are getting from oil is going down by the day, we need to be very proactive and think wisely.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kingsley. And that's about it on the program. One thing I'd like to point out is that it's essential for us to recognize that Africa's infrastructure often lags behind the urgent demand of climate change and natural disasters. Many dams and drainage systems are in despair, leaving communities vulnerable. We must advocate for effective governance and investment in resilient infrastructure, along with comprehensive disaster management strategies. Only then can we impact and mitigate the crisis and ensure a more safe future for all Africans. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of On Rights, Crime and Justice. Together, let's push for accountability and proactive solutions to safeguard our communities and environment. Once again, I'm Toni Ogunbanjo. Till next time.